Completion of Uthman Dan Fodio's jihad, conquering the Middle Belt and the South. When Uthman Dan Fodio started jihad in 1804 to conquer the Hausa states in northern Nigeria and parts of Cameroon, his excuse was that he wanted to establish a pure form of Islam. That was a lie. He wanted to conquer the people, take over their land, and impose Fulani emirs on them as their rulers. It was a geopolitical land grab, shrouded in religious garb, to deceive the unwary who were about to be enslaved. He succeeded. He conquered the Hausa states one state at a time, took their land and resources, and imposed Fulani emirs, usually his relatives, to rule with iron fist over all the Hausa states. He named this area Sokoto Caliphate. His relatives, who he made emirs and village heads, exercised absolute authority and control over the millions of Hausa people who, before then, had their independent governments. Those emirs were dictators who exercised the power of life and death over the millions of Hausa people over whom they ruled. The emirs seized all Hausa land, decreed that the land belonged to the emirs and village heads who portioned them out to individual farmers, and demanded 1/3 to half of the harvest the farmers gathered at harvest time. They also imposed other forms of taxes on the Hausa people, who they called talakawas or commoners, distinct from the Fulani rulers who were the aristocrats or the born to rule. The emirs did not only control the land of the Hausas, they exercised absolute control over anything and everything in their emirate. If the emir took fancy to a commoner's wife, he simply asked that the wife be transferred to him. If he fancied a man's daughter, he ordered that the daughter be sent to him as a wife. If he liked any property belonging to the Talakawa, he simply ordered that it be transferred to him. These were orders that were carried out without question. If the emir was displeased with the way a man reacted or behaved when the emir took his wife, the emir would order the man killed, and it was done. No questions asked. The emir shut down public highways and opened them at his pleasure. This is how the Hausa states lost their freedom and became a servile people ruled by a handful of despotic Fulani dictators called emirs. Stiff military resistance by the Gwari of southern Kaduna, the Angas, Birom, Chamba, Tiv, Idoma and Igala to the south, and the Kanuri to the northeast, plus difficult terrain and the defeat and subjugation of the Sokoto Caliphate by the British colonialists, combined to stop the jihad of Uthman Dan Fodio and his march toward the south. Before and immediately after Nigeria independence in 1960, descendants of Uthman Dan Fodio openly declared their intention to resume jihad until they dipped the Quran in the Atlantic Ocean. The leader of this second jihad, Sir Amadu Bello, the Sarduana of Sokoto, stated categorically that the Fulani will use the Gwari, the Angas, Birom, Chamba, Tiv, Igala, Yoruba, and Idoma of the Middle Belt as tools to continue their military campaign to conquer the south. He insinuated that Nigeria is a plantation bequeathed to the Fulani by Allah, and that the Fulani will milk it until it dies. The symbol of the resistance of Fulani enslavement of the south is Biafra. All the people residing in southern Kaduna, Jos, Panchi, Jalingo, through Wukari, Makodi, Otukpo, Ampa, Nsukka, Enugu, Onitsha, Owerri, Umuahia, Katsina, Ala, Obudu, Ikom, Abakaliki, Calabar, Port Harcourt, Opobo, Warri, Agbo, Asaba, and Uromi in the east, to Ilori, Okene, Gbomosho, Ibadan, Abeokuta, Lagos, Ado-Ekiti, Akure, Okitipupa, Benin City, and Sapele in the west must now fight for their freedom, self-determination, and defeat of the Fulani scheme to conquer and enslave all of you in the south. We are not suggesting that every nation encompassing these cities should become Biafra. Each nation in the geographical area from the Biram and Gas, Tiv, Chamba in the Middle Belt to Efik, Ibibio, Ijo, Igbo, Edo, and Yoruba in the Atlantic coast must now decide for itself whether to continue to stay in Nigeria and become Islamized and enslaved, or get out of Nigeria and assume its own identity, freedom, liberty, and nationality under its chosen name and political arrangement. Biafra has made its choice. Biafra will get out of Nigeria and will not be conquered, Islamized, and enslaved. It will not matter how difficult it is. It will not matter how long it takes, and it will not matter whether Nigeria likes it or not. This is Biafra's destiny, and we will take our destiny in our hands. When God created human beings, He bestowed on them certain inalienable rights. The right to life, right to live your life and not have someone else snuff it out. Freedom of speech, the right to speak your mind. Freedom of association, the right to decide for yourself who you want to associate with or be with. Freedom of religion, the right to choose how to worship God. Freedom of assembly, the right to assemble and meet with other people of your choice for purposes other than committing a crime. There are other natural rights. These rights are enshrined in the United Nations Charter and have been recognized and enforced in most parts of the world in recent times. It is as a result of these inalienable rights that the following new countries were created since 1990. They are Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Belarus, Ukraine, Moldova, and Russia, all of which were forcibly conscripted into the former Soviet Union or USSR. Then you have Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Montenegro, Kosovo, Serbia, Macedonia, all of which were formerly cobbled together and held by force as Yugoslavia by Marshal Tito until 1990 to 92. Then you also have Slovakia and Czech Republic, both of which were in a forced relationship, formerly called Czechoslovakia. Also, you have East Timor, which was formerly occupied by Indonesia. And finally, you have South Sudan, which was separated from Sudan and gained its independence in July 2011. These 23 countries all became independent between 1990 and 2011 as a result of the enforcement of the principle of self-determination by the United Nations. President Buhari knows this and agrees with the United Nations principle of peaceful coexistence and self-determination for all people. This is why, in his address to the United Nations General Assembly on September 28, 2015, General Muhammadu Buhari, the President of Nigeria, stated, quote, "Mr. President," referring to the United Nations General Assembly President, "as we engage in these annual debates, we need to remind ourselves of the principles that led to the founding of the United Nations. Among those are peaceful coexistence and self-determination of peoples. In this context, Mr. President, the unresolved question of self-determination for the Palestinian people and those of Western Sahara, both nations having been adjusted, it should be adjudged, by the United Nations as qualifying for this inalienable right, must now be assured and fulfilled without any further delay or obstacle. The international community has come to pin its hopes on resolving the Palestinian issue through the two-state solution which recognizes the legitimate right of each state to exist in peace and security. The world has no more excuses or reasons to delay the implementation of the long list of Security Council resolutions on this question. Neither do we have the moral right to deny any people their freedom or condemn them indefinitely to occupation and blockade. End quote. President Buhari himself, not a surrogate, not a representative, made these statements in front of heads of state of countries of the world, members of the United Nations, gathered in the hallowed halls of the United Nations in New York. If you remove the words Palestine and Western Sahara and substitute the word Biafra in their place, it becomes obvious to all right-thinking people that President Muhammadu Buhari also recognizes the right of Biafra to become a sovereign, independent nation. To say or think otherwise would amount to outright hypocrisy and gross dishonesty. The people of Biafra therefore hold President Buhari to his words, spoken in front of heads of state of countries of the world at the General Assembly of the United Nations in New York on December 28, 2015. But the nations and cities of the Middle Belt and the South are now under a new jihad that is more barbaric, insidious, outrageous, and ferocious than the jihad of 1804 to 1809. This jihad, which has been meticulously planned, is now being systematically implemented by the House of Fulani, who are in full control of every arm of the government of Nigeria. They control the army, the air force, navy, police, DSS, immigration, customs, Supreme Court, and the civil service. Over the past several years, Fulani mercenaries disguised as herdsmen have gradually infiltrated southern cities, towns, and even your remotest villages. They have collected data and sensitive information about your towns and villages. They march through your smallest villages, disguised as cattle herders, driving herds of cattle from place to place. But instead of long sticks with which they control their cattle, they are armed with AK-47s, APMGs, RPGs, and other kinds of automatic assault weapons. They don't carry one automatic weapon, they carry many strapped to the bodies of their cattle. They march past army and police checkpoints, and the House of Fulani Army and Police simply salute them as they go by. How is it that the Nigerian Army and Police never questioned them for carrying automatic assault weapons? Whereas, if you, a southerner, possess a homemade single-barrel gun or even a machete, the police and army will arrest you and drag you to prison if you are lucky and they don't shoot you first. Why? The House of Fulani Inspector General of Police even had the gumption to order community security personnel to surrender the weapons with which they protect their communities, while letting the House of Fulani mercenaries, called headsmen, openly walk all over our communities with assault rifles, AK-47s and RPGs, and other lethal weapons. Why? Why? They are not hiding their intention anymore. Can't you see it? These so-called House of Fulani cattle herders march through your towns, cities, and villages, destroying yams, cassava, rice, corn, and vegetable you planted in your farms. If you dare to challenge them or ask them to keep their cattle out of your farms, they shoot you, rape your wife and daughters who have accompanied you to the farms, or worse, kidnap and keep them as sex slaves. This has been happening so regularly in the past few years that some of our people have abandoned their farms, and the House of Fulani took them over and converted them to Fulani camps. In Jamal local government area in southern Kaduna, more than 20 villages have been sacked and the Indigenous slaughtered and chased away. Their homes and land have now been taken over and occupied by Fulani Islamist invaders, who brought their wives, children and cattle to occupy the land that belonged to the Katab. This is not a fairy tale. It is happening right now. Ask the Katab of southern Kaduna, ask the Birom of Barkin Ladi and other parts of southern Plateau that are suffering the same fate right now. It is also happening in Zuru in the southern part of Kebbi State, northern Nigeria. The Hausa Fulani in Nigeria have declared full-scale Islamic jihad on Christians in the Middle Belt and southern Nigeria. President Muhammadu Buhari is using the Nigerian Army, Air Force, Navy, DSS, and the entire federal government security apparatus to conduct this jihad, as well as supervise its progress. All the people living in Enugu, Anambra, Imo, Ebonyi, Delta, Edo, Benue, Abia, Rivers, Bayelsa, Akwa Ibom, Cross River, Kogi, Ekiti, Oso, Ondo, Oyo, Lagos must realize that this declared jihad is coming to them soon.
Shift time.
The Hausa Fulani intention to completely colonize and dominate other nations in the geographical area called Nigeria has not abated over the years. In fact, it has intensified and now is burning like wildfire. The tragedy is that, like the ostrich, Southerners have buried their heads in the sands of denial. They talk about Igbo presidency, Ijaw presidency, Urobo presidency, Ogoni presidency, Yoruba presidency, etc. They talk about creation of more states. They talk about resource control. What tiny token percentage of their own property they will happily accept from their sworn enemy, who stole their property in the first place. In fact, Abacha cut that percentage down to 1%, and the oil-producing states happily agreed. It is as if robbers invaded your home, killed your son, gang-raped your daughters, seized your house, cars, TV, bicycles, and all the furniture in your house, took over your multi-million naira bank account, and then offered to let you watch the TV in your house for 1 hour once every month, after which they kick you out. And what did you do? You happily go back to sleeping under the bridge, drinking sewer water, all the while thankful to the robbers every time you finish watching your 1 hour television in the month. Any human being who sees you laughing and smiling happily will simply say, "You the craze." Consider the following statements by the Hausa Fulani leaders over the years. Ahmadu Bello de Sardauna of Sokoto said, quote, "The new nation called Nigeria should be an estate of our great-grandfather, Uthman Dan Fodio. We must ruthlessly prevent a change of power. We use the minorities of the North as willing tools and the South as a conquered territory, and never allow them to rule over us, and never allow them to have control over their future." End quote. This statement was allegedly made by Sir Ahmadu Bello de Sardauna of Sokoto, leader of the NPC and premier of northern Nigeria, reported by Parrot newspaper 12th October 1960, republished on November 13, 2002 by the Tribune newspaper Ibadan. Earlier in 1947, Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, who later became the Prime Minister of Nigeria, in an address to his northern colleagues on the floor of the Northern House of Assembly, said the following, quote, "We do not want our southern neighbors to interfere in our development. We have never associated ourselves with the activities of these people. We do not know them. We do not recognize them, and we share no responsibility in their actions. We shall demand our rights when the time is ripe. If the British quitted, should be quit. Nigeria now, at this stage, the northern people will continue their interrupted conquest to the sea."
How do you help to maintain your...
Northern minorities never realized that the Fulani did not recognize them as part of the North. Again in 1948, Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa at the Legislative Council meeting stated as follows, quote, Since 1914, the British government has been trying to make Nigeria into one country. But the Nigerian people themselves are historically different in their backgrounds, in their religious beliefs and customs, and do not show themselves any sign of willingness to unite. Nigerian unity is only a British intention for the country.
Big or small as our equal.
In 1957, Sir Ahmadu Bello, the Sardauna of Sokoto and Premier of the North, restated the intention of the Hausa Fulani to conquer the South militarily and to Islamize them when he said the following, quote, "We, the people of the North, will continue our stated intention to conquer the South and to dip the Quran in the Atlantic Ocean after the British leave our shores."
Applying those eternal.
In 1961, in a television interview with the BBC, Sir Ahmadu Bello, Premier of Northern Nigeria, when asked about his northernization policy by a white British journalist and whether it will be a temporary or permanent feature, stated as follows, quote, "In actual fact, the policy is a northerner first. If you cannot get a northerner, then you get an expatriate like yourself on contract. If we cannot get that, then we will employ another Nigerian from the south on contract too. This is going to be a permanent policy as far as I foresee." End of quote. You can actually watch this interview on YouTube.
In that area.
The West African pilot of December 20, 1964 reported that Malam Balagaruba had proclaimed, quote, "The conquest to the sea is now in sight. When our God sent Ahmadu Bello said some years ago that our conquest will reach the seashores of Nigeria, some idiots in the south were doubting its possibility. Today, have we not reached the sea?
And now
Lagos is reached. It remains Port Harcourt. It must be conquered and taken."
All key posts in the north.
In 1966, after orchestrating and participating in the slaughter of 100,000 Igbo and other Easterners all over northern Nigeria, and anointing himself head of state and supreme commander of Nigeria, Yakubu Gowon, in his radio address to the country, actually stated as follows, quote,
but on contract too.
"Taking everything into consideration, the basis of unity in Nigeria is not there." End quote.
See the number of
Gowon himself said this.
learning institutions.
He is still
coming
alive.
out with a-
People, especially leaders of northern minorities, should now ask him why he went on to declare a war of genocide on Biafra.
Doesn't this damage the idea, sir?
In a terribly unguarded moment of brazen buffoonery,
Nigeria being pissed.
Aliyu Gwarzo, former head of the Nigerian State Security Service, blurted out the following, quote,
But how many northern
"When I say that the presidency must come to the north next year, I am referring to the Hausa Fulani core north and not any northern Christian or Muslim minority tribe. The Christians in the north, such as the Biron, the Tiv, the Katab, the Jaba, the Zuru, the Sayawa, Bachama, the Juku, the Idoma, the Bura, the Kilba, the Mbula, and all the others are nothing. And the Muslim minorities in the north, including the Kanuri, the Nupe, the Igbira, Babor, Shua Arabs, Mahon, and Bade, the Bura, the Igala, the Zarma, the Bariba, the Gwari, and all the others know that when we are talking about leadership in the north and in Nigeria, Allah has given it to us, the Hausa Fulani. They can grumble, moan, and groan as much as they want, but each time they go into their bedroom to meet their wives, and each time they get on their prayer mats to begin their prayers, it is we, the Fulani, that they think of, that they fear, that they bow to, and that they pray for. Some of them are even ready to give us their wives and daughters for one night sport and pleasure. They owe us everything. This is because we gave them Islam through the jihad waged by Sheikh Uthman Dan Fodio. We also captured Ilori, killed their local king, and installed our Fulani Emir. We took that ancient town away from the barbarian Yoruba and their filthy pagan gods. We liberated all these places and all these people by imposing Islam on them by force. It was either the Quran or the sword, and most of them chose the Quran. In return for the good works of our forefathers, Allah, through the British, gave us Nigeria to rule and to do with as we please. Since 1960, we have been doing that, and we intend to continue. The Igbo tried to stop us in 1966, and between 1967 and 1969, they paid a terrible price. They were brought to heel, and since then, they have been broken. No good luck or anyone else will stop us from taking back our power next year. We will kill, maim, destroy, and turn this country into Africa's biggest war zone and refugee camp if they try it. Many say we are behind Boko Haram. My answer is, what do you expect? We do not have economic power or intellectual power. All we have is political power, and they want to take even that from us. We must fight, and we will, in order to keep it. They have brought in the infidels from America and the pigs from Israel to help them, but they will fail. The war has just begun. The Mujahideen are more than ready, and by Allah, we shall win. If they don't want an ISIS in Nigeria, then they must give us back the presidency and our political power. Their soldiers are killing our warriors and our people every day. But mark this, even if it takes 100 years, we will have our revenge. Every Fulani man they kill is a death that will be repaired, even if it takes 100 years. The Fulani have very long memories. End of quote. Aliyu Ismail Agwarzo is a former head of Nigeria State Security Service. All of you from the Middle Belt and the South, what do you want to hear? What has Aliyu Ismail Agwarzo not told you? From 1980, the plot to Islamize Nigeria and conquer the South picked up steam. On November 8, 1999, Champion newspaper reported that Ahmed Sani, later governor of Zamfara State, had stated in an interview, "We will Islamize Nigeria," end quote. The same Ahmed Sani on May 16, 2000 went to Washington, D.C., the United States, and used the Voice of America to sell the introduction of Sharia in all northern states to the world. Under the ruse of organizing a symposium fraudulently titled, quote, "Nigeria's Quest for Democracy, Governance, Sharia and Civil Conflicts," end quote, Ahmed Sani claimed that Sharia will be only for Muslims and will not be imposed on Christians and non-Muslims. Olusegun Obasanjo, then president of Nigeria, called in to congratulate Governor Sani, and so did Archbishop Onayekon. The following people either participated live or by phone as speakers or panelists at this so-called conference on Quest for Democracy in Nigeria. Owen Dillard, African Division Director, Voice of America. Sanford Onga, Director, VOA. Honorable Ed Royce, Chair, Subcommittee on Africa, International Relations Committee. Olusegun Obasanjo, President, Federal Republic of Nigeria, by phone. Professor Jibril Aminu, Nigerian Ambassador to the United States. Mr. Rotimi Suberu, Fellow, Woodrow Wilson Center. Dr. John Vole, Georgetown University. Ms. Obiageli Ezekwesili, Harvard University. Alhaji Galil Umar Naaba, Speaker, Nigerian House of Representatives, by phone. Dr. Suleiman Nyang, Howard University. Alhaji Ahmed Sani Yarema Bakura, Governor of Zamfara State, Nigeria. John Onayekon, Archbishop of Abuja and Vice President of Kanu. Professor Chudi Waziri, Kesiti University of New York. Dr. John Padden, George Mason University. Kanu Agabi, Minister of Justice, Nigeria, by phone. Donald Penn, U.S. Congressman, Committee on International Relations. Ambassador Howard Jeter, Deputy Assistant Secretary for African Affairs, U.S. Department of State. Dr. Constance Freeman, Africa Center for Strategic Studies. Leslie Obiora, Human Development Group, World Bank. All of these people participated. Shamefully, less than 1 year after the introduction of Sharia law in northern Nigeria, the elected deputy governor of Kanu State led a team of Sharia law enforcers through the streets of Kanu, destroying businesses and establishments belonging to Southerners that he identified as not in compliance with Sharia law. It didn't matter that the businesses belonged to Christians and non-Muslims. Then the floodgates opened. June 2nd, 2000, the Chief Justice of Nigeria, Mohammed Uwais, demanded that Islamic Sharia law be taught in all southern universities. His son was recently reported killed while fighting jihad with ISIS in Syria. June 23, 2000, Guardian newspaper reported that the government of Kano State had stated clearly that Sharia is for everybody, Muslims and non-Muslims alike. July 6, 2000, Comet reported that former President Shehu Shagari asked Muslims to rise for Sharia. July 5, 2000, Post Express reported that Nigeria police flouted federal government instruction on Sharia as Nigeria police arrested innocent people relaxing in beer parlors in Sabongeri, Kano for using alcohol. August 1, 2000, Guardian reported that drinking joints in Katsina were forced to move to army barracks as the emir has declared that everyone in Katsina, Muslim and non-Muslim alike, will live by the laws of Sharia. April 28, 2001, Comet reported that Sharia court jailed 2 Christians for selling alcohol in Guzo, Zamfara State. May 24, 2001, Guardian reported that government officials in Borno State had arraigned non-Muslims in court for transporting alcoholic drinks. November 28, 2001, Guardian newspaper reported that Nigeria Police Commissioner Idris Mohammed ordered the Nigeria police in Enugu to disrupt and disband by force Igbo youths who had organized a pro-United States rally in support of the United States fight against terrorism in Afghanistan and the killing of Christian Igbo people in some states in northern Nigeria. Note that anti-United States demonstrations had gone on unchallenged in Sokoto, Kaduna, and Ibadan, and especially Kano, where it was so bad that more than 350 people were killed and more than 5 churches burned, reported by Compass on October 14, 2001. September 11, 2002, a bomb exploded at the Church of Christ in the Laranto suburb of Jos, and so the incidents kept growing until you could count scores of incidents every month. February 24, 2007, it was reported that Muslim fundamentalists set 9 churches ablaze in Niger State. February 16, 2007, it is reported that Kano State was seeking support to train 100 enforcers of Islamic Sharia law. May 17, 2007, several churches were marked for demolition in Zamfara State. May 17, 2007, Compass reports that Christian children in Sokoto in northern Nigeria were kidnapped and forcibly converted to Islam. It gave the name of a recent victim as Victor Udo Usien from Cross River State. May 20, 2007, agents of Borno State government demolished several Christian churches in Maiduguri. December 12, 2008, it was reported that 6 Christian pastors were murdered and 40 churches burned in northern Nigeria in post-election attacks by Muslim fundamentalists. March 30, 2012, Sahara Reporters reported that Malam Adamu Chiroma stated as follows, quote, God will bring new Usman Danfodio to clean up Nigeria, just as happened in Hausa Kingdom over 200 years ago, end of quote. Is there anyone who does not understand the meaning of this statement by Adamu Chiroma? There are more than 100 recorded incidents of attacks on churches in the Sharia states of Nigeria by 2012. So, why is everyone acting as if Boko Haram and the declaration of the total Islamization of Nigeria and the first conversion to Islam just started? Recall that on March 30, 2012, elomba.com had published a confession by Major Mustafa Jokolo, the former emir of Gwandu and one of the highest-ranking emirs in northern Nigeria, titled "Northern Politicians Created Boko Haram," end quote, in which the emir detailed how northern politicians who were aggrieved by the treatment of the North by President Obasanjo had decided to fight back using an independent military force called Boko Haram. August 27, 2001, Guardian reported that former head of state Muhammadu Buhari had called for the implementation of Sharia law in all the states of Nigeria. Buhari had earlier been criticized for an alleged statement to the effect that Muslims in Nigeria should vote for only fellow Muslims in future elections. As a special guest at the first yearly National Convention on the Supreme Council for Sharia in Nigeria, held at the Ariwa House in Kaduna, Buhari urged Muslims to be bold in their efforts to ensure that Sharia law is rooted in all the states in Nigeria. He stated, quote, "For Muslims in Nigeria, as I mentioned at other occasions, at least twice, we were overrun by the colonialists and our way of life was drastically changed. And one of the things we lost for being overrun by colonialists is for us to be denied the freedom to practice our religion as it is, or as it was, and as it has always been. But God, in His infinite mercy, brought this independence back to us through a democratic system of government." End quote. He then continued, quote, "It is a legal responsibility God has given us within the context of one Nigeria to continue to uphold the practice of Sharia wholeheartedly and to educate non-Muslims that they have nothing to fear, because the biggest fear of Nigerians are three insecurities that I identified a long time ago. I believe that education is the most difficult one because of the forces outside that are insisting that Muslims in Nigeria should not be allowed to raise their heads, which to me is not the ideal thing." End quote. Concluding, Buhari stated, "This, quote, this is the sacrifice Muslims will have to make and persuade their fellow countrymen who are non-Muslims to accept. I will continue to show openly and inside me the total commitment to Sharia movement that is sweeping all over Nigeria. God willing, we will not stop the agitation for the total implementation of Sharia in the country." End quote. Present at this event were Alhaji Abdul Kadir Kure, Governor of Niger State, Alhaji Saniza Zango Daura, Alhaji Awal Ibrahim, Emir of Suleja, representatives of the governments of Kanu, Zamfara State, Kaduna State, Kebbi State, and Sokoto State, as well as Islamic scholars from Jigawa, Plateau, Niger, Borno, Imo, and Enugu. Today, Muhammadu Buhari is the president of Nigeria, and people are shocked by his northernization and Islamization policies. Buhari contested for this presidency 4 times before he became president. During his 3rd attempt, Hausa Fulani leaders actually said that if he did not win, the North will make the country ungovernable. They did. Boko Haram became intractable. The Hausa Fulani sent their leaders to America and Europe to lie to Americans and Europeans, and indeed the world, that Boko Haram was caused by poverty in the North, resulting from neglect by the Nigerian federal government, a federal government that they had controlled for 44 of the 55-year existence of Nigeria as an independent country. For example, the Jodidi lecture given by Sultan of Sokoto, Muhammad Saidi Abubakar III, at Harvard University on October 3, 2011. Pertinent questions leaders of the free world did not bother to ask are: where did these poor people the Sultan of Sokoto was talking about get the money to buy brand new BMWs, Volkswagen Passats, Mercedes-Benzes, and other expensive cars, which they were using as car bombs. Where did they get the money to buy hundreds of thousands of AK-47s, RPGs, APMGs, etc.? How in the world did these poor little folks acquire a couple of tanks and armored personnel carriers which they were using? The cost of these will certainly run into millions of dollars. No, the West and even Nigerians never bothered to ask those questions. They just swallowed the lies the Hausa Fulani leaders fed them. And when the Frankenstein the Hausa Fulani leaders created got out of their control, the West and Nigerians were quick to blame it all on Goodluck Jonathan and his administration. Buhari and his Hausa Fulani oligarchs got exactly what they wanted, and the West helped make Buhari the president of Nigeria. After sowing the wind, Nigeria is now reaping the whirlwind. Emboldened Hausa Fulani mercenaries, disguised as herdsmen, armed to the teeth with assault rifles, are now rampaging all over the Middle Belt and the South, sacking town after town and occupying them, killing and maiming men, women, and children, raping mothers and daughters, burning down houses, rice fields, and barns where harvested grains and yams are stored. They are on the march down to the Atlantic Ocean, from Jos through Barkin-Ladi, Panshin, Shandam, Wukari, Jalingo, Makurdi, Agatu to Uzuwane, and from Okabinambo and Okabinimbo. On the western side, they are doing exactly the same thing across Zulu, Southern Kaduna, Kogi State, Ondo State, Oyo State, Lagos State, Ekiti State, Edo State, and Delta State, as far down as Ughelli, a couple of miles from the Atlantic Ocean. What have southern leaders been doing, you might ask? They are begging Buhari to rein in the Hausa Fulani mercenary army that he created. When the Hausa Fulani attacked and slaughtered hundreds of thief people in Agatu and Buruku local government areas, the governor kept calling President Buhari, hoping that he will take his call. When the Hausa Fulani invaded and sacked Okabinimbo and surrounding towns, the governor of Enugu State kept calling President Buhari the commander-in-chief of the Nigerian army, the chief of staff of the Nigerian army, the inspector general of police, several days before the invasion, to inform them that his community was in imminent danger of attack from Hausa Fulani mercenaries, disguised as cattle herders.
Cutting off hands for stealing, death for renouncing Islam. This group
For several days, Buhari refused to take the governor's call.
They've stopped.
The army chief of staff and the inspector general of police
And other cities
refused to intervene and stop the invasion.
zones starting.
The Islamic jihadists surrounded the town and slaughtered scores of people, burned down the churches in the town and destroyed houses and farms before going back to their base. The same thing happened when the governor of Benue State called the same federal authorities for help as their towns were being invaded and destroyed by Fulani
And
mercenaries.
his friends are fly-poaching.
We don't know exactly what happened when Ulufalaye was kidnapped by the same Hausa Fulani mercenaries disguised as cattle herders, as well as what happened in all the other cases all over Kogi, Edo, Benue, Taraba, and Delta States.
By any means.
What we know is that it was this kind of failure of indigenous leaders to act, lack of clear understanding by the indigenous leaders of the danger facing their people, poor analysis by indigenous leaders of the intention of the enemy, and the unwillingness of the indigenous to take tough, collective, decisive, bold action to deal with the imminent danger that led to the conquer of all the northern Hausa states by the Fulani jihadists between 1804 and 1809.
Comes down to if you don't like
That is what is about to happen to all the people from Zuru, Kafanchan, Jos, through Wukari, Jalingo, Numan, Boko, Calabar, Uyo, Port Harcourt, Aba, Onitsha, Enugu, Makurdi, and from Ogbomoso through Abeokuta, Ibadan, Lagos to Ile-Ife, Akure, Benin City, Asaba, Yenegua, Uyeli, Bonny to Opobo. The situation is now so bad that in Lagos, Enugu, Port Harcourt, Calabar, Aba, Onitsha, Benin, Enugu, Abakaliki, there is palpable fear and panic that Islamic jihadists have infiltrated these cities and will wreak havoc on the people at any time.
A religious movement, but a
What have the governors and leaders of thought in these places done?
campaign designed to divide.
They have asked their citizens to pray and fast so that these evil mercenaries will not attack them.
Creating mistrust, and particularly,
Nothing could be more lame and indeed more
I
stupid.
think this is part of their aim.
We all agree that prayer is important. But didn't Bible tell us that God helps those who help themselves? What did Jesus Christ do when he saw the temple, his father's house, being converted into a market by avaricious merchants? Did he kneel down and pray?
UK, but all
No. He took a whip and drove the money changers, their animals, and their money out of the temple, overturning their tables in the process. He took action. He did not pray and fast.
Sharia is adhered.
Christians, please stop deceiving yourselves. Your pants are on fire.
If these Muslims
Which human being on being diagnosed with breast or lung cancer will go out and buy Tylenol for treatment instead of radical surgery and radiation treatment in a specialist hospital? Have you lost your minds?
A man walked into a mosque and killed 49.
It has been more than 20 years since Biafran activists started screaming at the top of their lungs that the diabolical plan to completely Islamize Nigeria is real and is being systematically and meticulously implemented. All attempts to rouse the conscience and the sensibilities of top Christian clergy failed, like seeds planted on rocky barren soil.
Friday morning after
The clergy were too busy making money and making friends with highbrow government officials. They didn't care, even as hundreds of churches and thousands of Christian faithful were butchered, slaughtered, and burned alive, and their churches bombed, burned, and desecrated by known jihadists.
ever mysterious white
The clergy watched, pretended to be helpless, and then asked their persecuted congregations to pray and fast for deliverance as they dutifully preached the gospel of one Nigeria, Nigeria unity, Nigeria united and indivisible to the poor folks who were being persecuted for their religious belief.
since February.
Southern Creole clergy, believing that Islamization will never touch them, relaxed and dutifully went about the business of making money.
Baby. Now raise your
Now, Islamization is not only at your doors, it is in your bedroom.
calling violence against Nigeria.
Now, the fear of forced Islamization is palpable. From southern Kaduna, Jos, Panshin, Jalingo, Makurdi down to Calabar, Uyo, Port Harcourt, Benin, Lagos, up to Bida, Lokoja, Okene, Ado-Ekiti, Ilesha, Ibadan, Lagos, and all the land in between.
Christian village.
Slumber
In the majority
time.
Hindu nation of India, hate crimes against Christians
Is it?
jumped 57% in the
Maybe.
first 2 months of this
Just
year. 2 men were murdered in February for their faith in another.
As you squabble among yourselves and pretend that the Hausa Fulani mercenaries will only attack and conquer your neighbor and not you,
They poured boiling
they progress, and by the time it will be your turn,
Gaza Strip this
there will be
weekend
no
where
one left to
Palestinians
help you.
celebrated a terrorist
You can be wise now and swear that what happened to the Hausa states in northern Nigeria in the 1800s and to Darfur in 2003, where Islamic mercenaries called Janjaweed sacked numerous Christian and traditional communities, slaughtering them, burning down their houses and taking over their land in Sudan, will not happen to you. Or you can hide your heads in the sand until your communities are sacked and destroyed by these Fulani Islamic jihadists.
It's
The
almost
choice
as though the media
is
cherry
yours.
picks what evil it's going to focus
Buhari will go to Lagos and tell the Yoruba that he loves them and that they have nothing to worry about. He will also tell them that the Ijaw militants and the Igbo are the problem and that he will deal with them. He will dole out money to some Yoruba leaders who will sing his praises all around Yoruba land, and if the people are naive, they will believe them.
Think it does.
50 years ago, Yakubu Gowon told the Ijo that the Igbo were the problem, and that the Ijo had nothing to worry about, since the Hausa Fulani are their best friends. He promised them that after they help him and the Caliphate destroy the Igbo and Biafra, he will turn Ijoland into paradise. They believed
Into
him.
that mosque in New Zealand and
What
open fire is about as
He confiscated their petroleum and handed it over to the Hausa Fulani oligarchs. He took over all their land, then their water resources. He completely destroyed and polluted their land with pollution that will take several decades and billions of dollars to clean up, if at all. And when the people complained, he and his Hausa Fulani oligarchs slaughtered them in thousands and destroyed their homes.
Hey guys, Pastor Greg Locke here.
Today, his people and their land are under attack by the Fulani jihadists that he created, enthroned, and cuddled.
Killed those precious people.
Awolowo was deceived by Yakubu Gowon.
And we got to
Abiola was deceived by Ibrahim Babangida. Both died with hot tears of regret rolling down their cheeks.
dying in Nigeria at the hands of Islamic terrorists.
Biafrans. Remember that the Hausa Fulani started in the 1940s and 50s with looting your goods in your shops and then burning down the shops. This was in their own northern towns of Sokoto and Kanu.
God forbid.
When you didn't react, they escalated it in the middle 1960s to killing you and your families in tens of thousands all over northern Nigeria.
Yea, thousands of them.
From the middle 1960s to 1970, they declared a genocidal war on the people of Biafra.
The bias.
As the Nigeria-Biafra war ended, they looted everything that they could lay their hands on, including money, furniture, books, goods in markets, household utensils, vehicles, beds, and even brooms and children's old foam mattresses, yellowed from years of use.
Being killed by black.
They had no shame as they loaded all these things onto lorries and flatbed trucks and headed to their homes in northern and western
Fox
Nigeria.
News, CNN, it ought to be all.
By the 1980s, the money and materials they had looted and stolen had run out. Like parasites, they wanted a new source of supply, and so they amped up their attacks, looting, stealing, robbing Easterners on the highways, in markets, churches, and private homes all over northern
It didn't have nothing to do with Trump. The guy
By 2000, they started to pursue you down to your homes in your homeland.
in the next couple of days.
Now, they are set to completely take over your home.
At the hand of Muslims.
They are kidnapping you and members of your family, raping your wives and children, laying siege on your cities, towns, and villages, farms, sacking villages and establishing Hausa Fulani settlements there. Your ancestral lands are going,
I'm here to tell you, I'm
going, and will soon be gone.
and support the gospel.
You can act now or gnash your teeth and cry midnight cry.
They are heroes for the kingdom of God.
The Igbo, Yoruba, and other ethnic groups in the south,
Dying all the time.
and severally and individually outnumber the Fulani several times over. So, how have the Fulani, one of the smallest ethnic groups in Nigeria, been able to almost conquer and subjugate these large ethnic groups in Nigeria? Are they more educated than them? No.
Killed because of their religion.
Do they have more scientists and inventors?
In New Zealand,
No.
they were Christians in
Do they have superior war machine? No. Are they superior in number or potential soldiers? No. So, what has made it possible for them to virtually overrun and subjugate these other ethnic groups?
in the Western news media.
One
In the
thing
2 weeks in March leading up to the attack on the mosque.
They figured out how to manipulate the leaders of these ethnic groups, make them fight each other, while the Fulani sit back and reap the spoils after the ethnic groups must have decimated one another. In this art of manipulation and deceit, they use two carrots: religion, Islam, and money. They use these two interchangeably depending on the situation. Their ultimate goal is the spoils accruing to them from these wars, is control of political power with which they steal all your resources, enslave you, and now want to Islamize you.
Christians a year in
1804, Othman Dan Fodio deceived the leadership of each Hausa state into believing that he wanted to establish a pure form of Islam. He then recruited soldiers from one Hausa state to attack and fight another Hausa state. The Hausa states fought, weakened, and decimated one another. Uthman Dan Fodio then established the Sokoto Caliphate, crowned himself Caliph, appointed Fulani people emirs to impose autocratic rule over each Hausa state. The emirs were accountable only to Uthman Dan Fodio and possessed the power of life and death over the subjects of the conquered Hausa states. The Hausa states lost their freedom, liberty, self-rule, and were treated as slaves. The parasitic Fulani, having engulfed the Hausa states, now turned and transmuted into the Hausa Fulani and adopted the Hausa language as their lingua franca. During the British occupation and colonization, the Fulani reminded everyone, including the British, that they intend to continue their conquest to the sea when the British
constantly attacked on television programs. There is never a negative.
They have added a second plank, that they will completely Islamize the whole of Nigeria.
Fox News.
At independence, the Fulani deceived Nnamdi Azikiwe and the NCNC into going into political alliance with them while isolating Awolowo and the action.
When it comes to reporting on the rights abuses
and their kit and kin in Midwestern
Christians in Nigeria.
At the same time, the Fulani decided to punish the thief and their kin for their refusal to politically support the Hausa Fulani oligarchy, represented by the NPC, Northern People's Congress. In the attack on the thief, they used primarily army officers from the south to conduct the humiliation of the thief. Then the Fulani sowed discord among the Yoruba and convinced Esela Akintola and his group to ditch the action group and the Yoruba people and ally with Hausa Fulani oligarchs against their own people, and especially against Chief Awolowo. The Fulani, using the Nigerian army, was ready to wallop the Yoruba, according to Major Adewale Ademoyiga, a Yoruba, one of the three majors that planned the January 15th, 1966.
Abuja is CBN.
Igbo, Yoruba, and Tiv army officers intervened to stop the slaughter of Yoruba. The Fulani were outraged and quickly mobilized Hausa Fulani, Yoruba, Middle Belt, Urobo, and Ijo army officers and politicians to fight the...
What happened to your family members?
Igbo and their brothers in eastern Nigeria.
About 10 days or so.
Dangling the myth of one Nigeria as the weapon of deceit and money and property as the promise of reward.
And I just...
Awolowo, who had been saved by the East, fell for it and went into alliance with the Fulani against the Igbo and Biafra. So did Anthony Enahoro and Edwin Clark. The Hausa Fulani were now in full control of the political and economic power of Nigeria. Shortly after Biafra, Ijo and Urobo political leaders who had bought the one Nigeria myth started asking for self-determination. Once again, using the one Nigeria weapon, the Fulani, now in full control of the Nigerian army, used Middle Belt officers to devastate Ijo and Urobo communities and kill their leaders. Sarawiwa Adakaba.
So this was...
Then Chief Abiola attempted to use Islamic religion as leverage to gain political power. The Hausa Fulani again used Nigerian army officers from the Middle Belt to quash that dream. Immediately after that, General Malu from the Middle Belt who had done the job of destroying Odifo Obasanjo, the puppet of the House of Fulani, was humiliated and his people killed by agents of the House of Fulani. He died gnashing his teeth, just like Chief Awolowo.
Violence against Christians of
The House of Fulani, having completely humiliated most of the southern ethnic groups and captured all political power, decided to go on to the second goal of their agenda,
you are right.
brazen Islamization of every part of Nigeria.
Is it specifically happening?
Buhari has now put the plan into force by identifying and delineating the boundary where northern Islamization was stopped years ago.
Is because
Ibadan, Ado-Ekiti, Zuru, Okene, Southern Kaduna, Jos, Shandam, Pankshin, Makode, Jalingo, Wukari to Nuna.
with AK-47s.
This is now the new front for Islamization. Second, staffing all the top levels of the Nigerian armed forces, the police and the immigration, etc., with Muslim Hausa Fulani officers. Third, enlisting and arming Islamic mercenaries, masquerading as Fulani herdsmen, and unleashing them on the community
All his cattle to be able to buy an AK-47.
located
Gary,
along
what
the
we have
religious
is a
front line.
genocide.
Occasionally, they make foray behind the religious front line into Enugu, Ugeli, Benin,
their religion
and even
on the
The boundary of the Islamic Jihad corresponds with the boundary of the 12 northern Sharia states. Full-scale jihad to dip the Quran in the sea is now in full force.
such sophisticated arms.
Police of Eastern Nigeria, people of Eastern Nigeria, Biafra,
Overpower the military.
Western Nigeria and the Middle Belt, you really don't have many options.
And there's some
Separate yourself from Nigeria now or die as slaves in it. It does not matter whether you are rich or poor, bishop, pastor, evangelist, male or female, Catholic, Protestant or Pentecostal, chief, traditional ruler with whatever title, highly educated intellectual or no education at all, old or young, governor or minister, member of APC or PDP, or whatever party you belong to. The same fate awaits you, which is forced conversion to Islam, loss of your land, freedom, and dignity.
and they can dominate.
Demand a referendum now so that those who want out of Nigeria can leave and those who love Nigeria can stay.
The Fulani had
Stop talking about restructuring Nigeria.
violent jihad to Nigeria.
It is fool's gold. If restructuring Nigeria back to the regions would be so great,
of that jihad.
would stop the House of Fulani scheme to conquer and Islamize southern Nigeria. Please explain to us why the House of Fulani Federal Government of Nigeria in 1960 declared war on the thief civilian population for supporting the United Middle Belt Congress.
By the Fulani.
Killed so many Igbo in northern Nigeria in 1945, 1953, killed thousands of people all over western Nigeria in 1965 in their effort to conquer the people of western Nigeria, slaughtered 100,000 Igbo and other Easterners in the 1966 pogrom, declared a genocidal war on Biafra 1967 to 1970, stabbed to death more than 3 million babies, children, pregnant women, and old men, completely destroyed the town of Odi, killing more than 4,000 innocent civilians in the process.
One state.
Why did the House of Fulani commit all these atrocities, even as they were in full control of the resources of the
They
South?
killed 19 people, including the priests who were serving.
Stop talking about creation of states. It makes absolutely no sense and is used as distraction by the House of Fulani.
One more.
Stop talking about percentages of revenue to be allocated to your states. It is insane. Your private property is either yours or it is not. You make the call. Stop talking about the cattle that House of Fulani sell to you. It is childish in this age of globalization and free trade. You do not need the cattle that the Fulani mercenaries masquerading as herdsmen bring down south. The United States, Argentina, and Brazil,
And I know in the past,
and several other countries will happily supply several times over and cheaply too all the beef that your people will ever need. Ask South Korea, Japan, and China. You can equally buy from friendly countries in West Africa, pending the time you develop your own ranches. The same thing applies to any other item that seems attractive to you and your friends. Stop talking about small land area and being landlocked.
A lot of people
Have
are
you
suffering
ever heard of
with
or
no
been to
medical
Switzerland,
attention. So we've been able to go there
Liechtenstein and Luxembourg,
and provide free.
all in Europe? All of them are landlocked. They have about the highest GDP per capita
Just happened.
in Europe, and their standard of living is among the highest in the world.
Go in there.
As for land area, ask South Korea and Japan what their populations are and look at their land areas. They rank among the most densely populated and most technologically advanced and wealthy countries in the world. Besides, your sons and daughters are all over the world, distinguishing themselves in all fields of human endeavor and making enormous and outstanding contributions to humanity. Many of them are also getting rich using their prodigious talent and demonstrable skills. Nigeria kills knowledge, talent, ingenuity, creativity, and skill.
The deadliest place in the world.
Southerners, and this includes the Middle Belt, and especially Biafrans, please stop talking about this silly stuff and embrace the global world with your talents and God-given abilities. You have several alternatives. What do you really need the Hausa Fulani for anyway?
We need aid.
Nothing.
You know, I know that
Really?
CBN 700 Club is in Nigeria.
Seek and demand your separate identity.
We know that.
Insist on your freedom and insist on your self-determination, especially through a referendum right now. Stop talking about elections that have already been rigged in favor of Buhari. Your independence will enable you to begin to live like human beings while leaving a legacy of freedom, liberty, and hope for your children, your children's children, and generations coming after you. The peoples of the Middle Belt, through their leaders, should right now team up with the peoples of Western and Eastern regions through their leaders, and at a summit, agree to work together to defend themselves as a unit.
Things that should happen.
Irrespective of whether they call themselves Biafra,
Prayers, because
Ududua, Middle Belt, or anything else. It is now about your safety and survival, not what you will call yourself. If you continue asking the Hausa Fulani-owned government of Nigeria to protect you, the Hausa Fulani government will continue to use the so-called Nigerian Army, Air Force, Navy, Police, DSS, EFCC, courts, etc., all of which have been converted into the Hausa Fulani instrument of jihad to kill you and take over your land.
the country.
Their ultimate goal is to wipe you out,
What is going on here? Because
convert you to Islam, and finally take over your land. It is land grab, and they don't care how many millions of you they murder in the process. For the Fulani, the end justifies the means. In Plateau and Southern Kaduna, they are already achieving that goal. They have used the jihad mercenaries, who you wrongly call herdsmen, to wipe out several communities, take over their land, and change the names of the Biron, Katab, and Gas and Gware communities to Hausa Fulani names. This is happening before your very eyes, and you are holding endless meetings and asking Buhari's Hausa Fulani jihad security agencies to defend you. Are you nuts?
In this era.
If you don't band together and plan your collective defense right now, you all will be conquered one community at a time, until all of you, Biron, Gware, and Gas, Katab, Chamba, Mahi, Tiv, Idoma, Igbira, Igala, Nupe, and a handful, Busa, Bariba, Yoruba, Edo, Urobo, Ishekiri, Isham, Ijo, Igbo, Ibibio, Efik, Ekoi, are conquered by a handful of land-grabbing jihadists. As they confuse you with talk about APC and elections, they are busy taking over your land one community at a time. And what are you talking about? Elections, which the Hausa Fulani have completed plans to rig for Buhari and return him for a second term, during which his jihadist army and mercenaries will complete the conquer of your people and take over of your land. The German Lutheran pastor, Martin Niemöller, in a poem he wrote about the consequences of the cowardice of German intellectuals in the face of Nazi persecution and obliteration of various groups during the Nazi rise to power in 1930s, warned, I quote, "First, they came for the Jews, but I did nothing because I'm not a Jew. Then they came for the socialites, but I did socialists, but I did nothing because I'm not a socialist. Then they came for Catholics, but I did nothing because I'm not a Catholic. Finally, they came for me, but by then, there was no one left to help me." End of quote. Let this be a warning to all the groups listed above. If you think that the Fulani will spare you in their quest for Islamization and seizure of your land, you are terribly mistaken. They will certainly come for you. Unless you stand together with other groups right now and mount a common defense from Boni to Jos and Kafanchan, and from Numan to Arochukwu to Osogbo, Ibadan to Lagos, you will regret it mightily later. May God guide you to do the right thing quickly and liberate your people from Hausa Fulani jihadist invasion.